So not the case. But I also, it's 89 verses. 89 verses. And so we're going to get through it on a faster scale because it's very repetitive, as you'll see. But there are some and I know today we're going to read about two things that are very interesting in the Torah that are taken up later by the rabbis. Actually, the two things have one thing in common. They're very different in some ways. Well, I guess they kind of relate to the body, but in both cases, the rabbis actually try to discourage people from doing these things. You'll see them today. There's lots of happening. We're going to read from chapter 5 through probably chapter 9, 8 or 9, and it's just an interesting kind of smorgasbord of stuff. So technically speaking, we started the second parsha of Numbers last week with Parshat Naso, and that's where the Jewish break is on it. The Christian break on it is actually here, which is where we finished, which made a little bit more sense because what we read about last week was the counting of the people. John, you're late, man. We're just getting started, John. Don't worry. Last week I'm just kind of doing a summary of where we were. I'm doing the intro part. Some people skip over this part anyways. At least on Netflix or whatever, or Disney or whatever it is. Anyway, one of those services. So last week we read about the numbering of the tribes, and then we read about how they were stationed around the Mishkan, how they were stationed around the tabernacle. And then we talked about how they broke down and carried away the tabernacle by the Levites, the different groups of the Levites. There's 3 subgroups of Levites, and then you had the priests, the 3 groups of Levites. So the tribes are broken up into 4 quadrants, 4 quads. And then the priests and the Levites are essentially broken up into 4 quads. The Kohanim, and then the Gershonites, the Merarites, the Kohathites. Those are the 3 groups, and that's what we finished with last week. We went through this list and we went through the different tribes, and then and again the subgroups of the priests, and then we came here now to chapter 5 today. So today we're going to continue Naso, the second portion of Numbers, which this year we'll read probably. Well, I can tell you, we'll be reading it in about 2 months. Sometime around end of May, we'll be reading this. And then by June, we're about halfway through Numbers. And so today we're going to be reading the next few chapters, which aren't so much about numbers, but they do touch into some of the stuff we read about in Leviticus. And there are a couple things in here that are still said, still invoked, still part of our tradition. So let's take a look. So chapter 5 begins with the words, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, Sav et Bnei Israel, command or instruct the Israelites to remove from camp anyone with an eruption or discharge and anyone defiled by a corpse. And guess what? You heard this before because we read about it in Tazria and Metzora, the Torah portions we read back in Leviticus. All those things about eruptions, discharges, skin diseases. And here it says, again, a similar kind of thing, which is why the note says, look back at Leviticus. And here it's going to go into no detail. So don't worry. We're not going to have any detail except for this one. Remove male and female alike. Put them outside the camp so that they do not defile the camp of those in whose midst I dwell. So male and female are kind of just lumped together here, and you keep them outside the camp. And to some extent, it's a reflection of, again, the holiness of the camp. So it's not like they're thrown out of the community. They just can't stay with the group as they're now moving. And so they have to live outside of the community. On this basis, later on, people were also kind of held outside of the town, outside of the city, so that they could not infect other people. Here, it seems to be more a reflection of the fact that the entire community, to some extent, is in a sense of holiness, because God says, I'm in your midst. I'm with you while you're there. And then all it says, the next line is the Israelites did so, putting them outside the camp as Adonai had spoken to Moses, so the Israelites did. Done. They did it. So whoever fell into that category, they did it. So this is a little bit different than Leviticus, where we get the laws and they're told what to do. Here, we get the law, explained a little bit what to do, and then they do it. So that shows you a little bit different kind of take in numbers as opposed to Leviticus, where there's action happening and there's things happening. So there's not only laws given, but they're put into motion. And that's why Numbers is a little different than Leviticus. Adonai spoke to, I mean, in the sense that Leviticus seems like, okay, there'll be a time when you do this, or this is what you do in these cases, hypothetically, or not really hypothetically, but this will happen. And when it happens, you'll do it. Here, the law comes down, they do it, and then they move on. Next law. Speak to the Israelites when men or women, again, both, individually commit any wrong toward a fellow human being, thus breaking faith with Adonai, and they realize their guilt, they shall confess the wrong that they have done. They shall make restitution in the principal amount and add 1/5 to it, giving it to the one who was wronged. So again, this is somebody who committed something wrong. They realize their guilt. They're not necessarily doing it premeditatively with the knowledge that they're going to, hey, I can just give back the money. They didn't realize that they had done it. And then when they do it, they still have to pay a penalty, 20%.
So if this is, so it sounds like they're referring to somebody stealing something and taking it, but I mean, are they including any other kinds of laws besides?
No, well, no, wait. Yeah, they're including things that are taking something from someone.
Right.
And again, what the message is that when you wrong someone else, you're breaking faith with God. It's not just you're doing something bad to someone else, you're actually breaking faith with God. Yes, and so this would kind of come down to a situation where you took something from somebody and you didn't realize it was theirs, comes across that it was theirs. Look, in some cases, and there's entire discussions about this in the Talmud, in some cases, what if it was some kind of product that you sold? Maybe it was food, maybe it was an animal that you slaughtered or gave away. Well, or not gave away, but, ate or sold, and you don't have it anymore. Well, you have to figure out what the value was, what you sold it for, and then you have to add 20% to it. So there is a real sense in Judaism that if you find something, you better make sure that it doesn't belong to someone else. Yeah.
Is that when it goes to Moses' side?
Yeah, there's even a question here, right? If the party is deceased and has no kin to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to Adonai for the priest in addition to the ram of expiation with which expiation is made on their behalf. So again, a version of this we found earlier on in Leviticus at the beginning, but yeah, there's even a additional situation where you can't make expiation anymore. So yeah.
Thought, again, I'm probably my timeline wrong. The rabbis, right, were the arbitrators.
Yeah, later on.
Not
When there,
now.
yeah, when there are no more priests, it comes down to the rabbis, which is why the rabbis they do take it really seriously because, by that point, there's no temple anymore. So priests can't get the value. So it goes back to the community. It goes to the synagogue, or not really the synagogue, but the house of study. It goes to the community, the money that they would have paid now that can't go to a person, it goes back to the community. It doesn't go to the rabbi. It goes back to the community.
What year are we in there?
So this is, 1200 BC. This is 3000. This is 30. Well, no, John's asking in this moment, we're in 3200 BCE, 3200. Yeah, BCE. And now when we're in the time of the rabbis, we're in 2000 BCE or 1400.
We're still 1500 years, 1300 years before the rabbi.
Yeah. And
That's what the
so,
book should be, 1300 years before the rabbi.
yeah. And so for a long time, people relied on the priests to,
The rabbi was sages before there was rabbi.
yeah, but let's say rabbis are around the time of Jesus. By the time of Jesus, they're people are rabbis, Jesus, because they call Jesus a rabbi. So the rabbis are maybe 100 years before, 50 years before Jesus. There's people that are respected enough. But yes, you're right. Before they were rabbis, they were sages or scribes. They were called sophrim. Some people called them Pharisees. Some people called them, there was a development of those people that would later be called rabbis. But yes, until the temple is destroyed, the rabbis are essentially a group of people, a political or a philosophical branch. They don't really have any power. They don't have any power. Well, I shouldn't say they have no power, but they don't have much power. The priests still have power, at least when it comes to religion, at least when it comes to religious authority within Israel. So, and again, it kind of merged with political power during the time of the Maccabees. So they had a lot of power, the priests, disproportionate power, actually. So there were some rabbis who were priests. So some of them didn't just go, well, priests are all right. And some of them said, you know what, we better make sure we're doing the right thing. And there were some rabbis who came from who were priests. I mean, they were priests, and they said, you know what, this system is not working or needs to be checked. The rabbis never said, let's do away with the sacrifices. They 100% wanted the sacrifices. They expected the sacrifices to continue, but they said, you gotta think about why we're doing these. And what if you can't offer them? What do you do then? And so they were right, because when the temple was destroyed, there was no choice. So, but the rabbis weren't like hoping that the temple would be destroyed. I mean, that's the important thing. Like you think, well, they had vested interest in the temple not existing anymore, because then all the power shifted to them, but they didn't look at it that way. They didn't go, hey, it's great the temple is destroyed. They were upset. They were distraught. They were like everybody else. Can we continue? But, and there's still rabbis today that want to have the temple rebuilt, which would obviously put a lot of power back into a priesthood. So the only people I know who really are advocating for the temple to be rebuilt are rabbis. They're Orthodox, a segment of Orthodox rabbis, but they are rabbis. The people advocating for a temple to be rebuilt are not priests. There's not a group of priests that are going, we need to build the temple. I mean, some of the rabbis are also priests, but they're not doing it so that they can be in business. They're doing it because they believe that's what God wants them to do. In Jerusalem, at the Holy Temple, where the Dome of the Rock is right now. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what they want to do.
Let us take a picture of that.
Yeah, they want to do it. Every step that we get closer to that, they feel they're getting closer. So again, it's a small segment of the Orthodox Jews that are actually trying to do that. But there are some. But they are, what I'm saying, they are rabbis. They're not, they're doing it so that we can they're like, hey, let's get back in charge. All right, so what are these priests? These priests are going to get the gifts if so to any gift from among the sacred donations as the Israelites offer shall be the priests. And each shall retain his sacred donations. Each priest shall keep what is given to him. So it kind of sets the precedence for the priests doing pretty good. But again, they're doing work. It's not like they're just taking money in, at least originally. They were doing work. I say originally because eventually we have so many priests that there's not enough for everybody to do. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people. And here we're going to get a little nasty. Any party whose wife has gone astray and broken faith with him in that another man has had carnal relations with her unbeknown to her husband, kind of begs the question, what if he did know? And she keeps secret the fact that she has defiled herself without being forced, and there is no witness against her. But a fit of jealousy comes over him and he is wrought up with the wife who has defiled herself, or if a fit of jealousy comes over him and he is wrought up about his wife, although she has not defiled herself, that party shall bring his wife to the priest, and he shall bring as an offering for her 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour. No oil shall be poured upon it, and no frankincense shall be laid upon it. For it is a meal offering of jealousy, a meal offering of remembrance, which recalls wrongdoing. And this is a ritual we call the Sotah ritual. This is a very bizarre ritual that the rabbis definitely didn't want to do. They didn't want anyone, obviously, to be in a situation where they needed it, but they also didn't reinstate it once the temple was destroyed. Once there are no longer priests to invoke and make this happen, which we haven't gotten to yet, so don't worry, you haven't seen it yet. They didn't try to keep it going. So this is one of the things I said, the two things we're going to read today, where the rabbis are like, we don't know exactly how it was done. We're not looking to have it done. We actually like you not to do this. So again, this is a situation where a man believes that his wife has cheated on him. It does not apply to an unmarried woman. It does not apply to a married man who cheats with an unmarried woman. Make that clear. Because in a polygamous, or at least a society that allows for polygamy, it didn't work that way. This is a situation where the man believes that his wife has cheated on him. Now, you'll see different commentaries on this, different explanations on the law of the Sotah. We know this. I mean, we know because you've read it. The penalty for adultery that we read in Leviticus is that the couple is stoned to death. They're killed. So this is not a situation where we know the parties that were involved. They have admitted that they've done it. They've come forward and admitted that they've done it, where the penalty for that is being stoned to death. That's what it says in the Torah. So this is not that case. This is a situation where the woman has been accused of this. Her husband thinks that she's cheated on him, and she denies that this has happened. There's no witnesses, so there's no way to testify. By the way, the rabbis would say about the laws of adultery that in almost any case, the couple cannot be put to death. There might be a punishment for them. There might be a financial punishment. There might be a divorce. There might be even a whipping or two, a flogging, a public flogging, but there wouldn't have been an execution. Why? Because in almost every case, the rabbis at least, would have said that there is not enough evidence, conclusive evidence, to execute the parties. Correct. And not only that, they'd have to like willingly go, yeah, I did it. And then, by the way, the parties, according to the rabbis, would have to be told, did you know what the consequences were if you got caught? And if they didn't, then they're still also not responsible. So they really narrowed down how this could be applied, at least the judgment of execution. Now, in a case where adultery happened, and there was a punishment or a divorce or something like that, okay, that's a different situation. That's not this situation. A law of Sotah is where the man is still angry, thinks it happened, may have happened, but it may not have happened. And so he has to first come forward, goes through a ritual, and part of the ritual is he has to pay, or he has to pay, but there's a charge, there's a consequence to doing this, which is you have to bring the ephah barley flour. Okay, that's not that expensive, right? That's not, what is that going to be? A couple dollars? So that's not the issue. An ephah, the measurement is like a pound, not even, wait, this is a tenth of an ephah. So this is nothing. This is like not even half a pound, I don't think. No, not even half. This is not that much. And it's barley flour, which is the cheapest flour you can use. It's not even wheat flour. There's also no frankincense or oil, which is also expensive. No, none of that. So it's not really that expensive to do it, but there is something that there's a consequence to it. You have to bring that offering. And the priest shall bring her forward and have her stand before Adonai. Now, here's where it starts to get the real consequence. And not just for her, but for him too. Well, mostly for her. Let's be honest. What really happens here is that this ritual is done in front of other people. As you're going to see, there's a consequence here, which is that somebody actually has to, they enact this ritual in front of the public. Let's look. The priest shall take the sacral waters in an earthen vessel, and taking some of the earth that is on the floor of the tabernacle, the priest shall put it in the water. Okay, so you take a little of the earth that's right there in the tabernacle area, so it's kind of holy earth. You put it a little bit in there. That's not the magic yet. And I would say magic. Just look at this. After he has made the woman stand before Adonai, and place upon her the hands. Just see if there's anything. Oh yeah, here. The priest shall bear the woman's head. So here's the question: does he bear her head? Does that mean that he cuts her hair off?
He hasn't admitted it.
Well, so we don't know that, and Rashi says that's not the case. Maybe they dishevel her hair, they move her hair around. Well, that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. Cheryl just said, did they wear wigs back then? The rabbis actually imagine that they do. We don't know that they did have wigs, but they may have had their head covered. Just bearing your head, then that's the point, would have been humiliation. And so that's why they're saying this is yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just read what my notes say here. It says, he shall loosen her hair. But the notes say, a sign of openness for the guilty, an expectation of judgment and mourning. Let's see, hold on.
Yeah, so maybe she had braids or some tied up hair plates, they say, plaited hair, and that he takes them out, which would have been an act of humiliation, at least according to Jewish sources, something that they wanted to have done. So this is an act of humiliation and an act of, again, taking away the woman's modesty by, again, as Cheryl points out, that at least the imagination of the rabbis is again, 1,000 years later, is that the women had their heads covered at this point, and now they have to have their heads without a covering.
But this is still, the woman hasn't admitted it.
Oh, yeah, she's not going to admit anything.
And the guy just suspects it, but they still figure out.
Yep.
he probably did, even though they don't know.
Well, here's what happens. He place upon her hands the meal offering of the remembrance. So she holds the meal, which is the meal offering of jealousy. And in the priest's hands shall be the water of bitterness that induces the spell. And these are called the bitter waters, right? It says we don't exactly know why they're called bitter waters. Are they bitter because they taste bitter, or because they create something that's bitter, or they're because the man's bitter with her? So the word marim, like maror, for Passover, bitter herbs, is here, right? We know that it's not a good thing, it's bitter, some type of bitterness here. And here it says, the priest shall adjure the woman, saying to her, if no other party has lain with you, if you have not gone astray in any defilement while living in your husband's household, be immune to harm from this water of bitterness that induces the spell. Okay, so there's a spell on the water. Okay, the water has some kind of magical power. And what he says to her, the priest says to her, is that if you're innocent, the magic will be that the water doesn't do anything to you. So in some extent, like some people, like the way I always thought of it, was that the waters were magical and knew whether the person was guilty or not. Exactly. Well, that's the way it's seen as it's a lie. It's a lie detector. Well, that's what the thought is. Actually, Don, to some extent, the thought here is that she's worried, and that the psychosomatic reaction of having this would either force the woman to acknowledge or would actually cause her to get sick. But so the magic actually is, to some extent, that she won't get sick from the waters, because the waters will make you sick. But if you haven't had defilement, you'll be fine. So so it's actually saying, not, hey, let the water make you sick if you're bad. It's going to make you sick, right? And so she's thinking in the back of her mind, oh, in order for me to be healthy, I need to be pure. So that's a little different than being told the waters are going to make you sick, and that's where the magic is. Now, the magic is that you're clean, and therefore the waters won't do anything to you. And it's because now I've said that. That's you're now going to be immune. You'll be clean. And here, of course, is the other side. But if you've gone astray while living in your husband's household and have defiled yourself, if any party other than your husband has had carnal relations with you, here the priest shall administer the curse of adjuration to the woman. As the priest goes on to say to the woman, may Adonai make you a curse and an imprecation among your people, as Adonai causes your thigh to sag and your belly to distend. May this water that induces the spell, enter your body, causing the belly to distend and the thigh to sag. And the women shall say, Amen, Amen. She agrees to it. Yes.
Concerned that this one would be pregnant and it wouldn't be her husband's baby.
Maybe. Glory, what does your commentary there say for belly to sag?
See if it has anything.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
Your thigh to waist away and your abdomen to swell. The figurative language here speaks of the loss of the capacity for childbearing, and if pregnant, the miscarriage of the child. This is demonstrated by the determination of the fate of a woman wrongly charged. For a woman in the ancient Near East to be denied the ability to bear children was a personal loss of inestimable proportions. Since it was in the bearing of since it was in the bearing of children that a woman's worth was realized in the ancient world, this was a grievous punishment indeed.
Does that answer the question, Cheryl?
Yeah.
So you heard what Cheryl said. Will this
No.
cause miscarry if she has somebody else's baby inside her? And so that's at least part of what maybe is happening here. But as the rest of the note that Glory said, which is really actually what much of the rabbinic text actually doesn't talk that much about the miscarriage. It focuses more on the fact that it actually makes the woman infertile.
Fertile.
It causes her uterus to become distended.
But it also describes a woman that's gone through menopause.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not that your uterus comes out of your. This does happen to people. It happens, unfortunately, actually, sometimes while they're giving birth. And so, what this does is it actually, the magic of this causes a woman's uterus to essentially prolapse or come out of her body.
This stuff 3,000.
They were. but they were.
They were simple people.
Okay, but this,
They were going elementary,
okay, but
high
this,
school.
but this is what they, but this is what, this is the text. I understand, but this is the text. The text 100% says it. The commentary says maybe it caused her uterus to, it was, but the word beten here, that's the word here, is uterus. I mean, it isn't just your belly. It's not your stomach. It's not that your stomach got, well, it's not that your,
Then this isn't God's first earth.
why?
This is too detailed. This
I-
whole thing, sorry, this
John-
whole thing we've been doing is too detailed. It's not his first earth. This is not his first rodeo.
Okay, well, listen, there's people who agreed with you who said that thousands of years ago, that God must have created other worlds before this one. It's interesting that you say that, because that is actually a teaching. One of the traditional teachings is that, yeah, this is not God's first rodeo.
Leviticus,
Yeah, so there's another possibility though, John, which is that it's written after people have been around for thousands of years and they know a little bit about human nature, and they know a little bit about the body, and they know enough about the body to know that, yeah, sometimes this happens. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens and the woman did nothing and she just an unfortunate illness, but they knew it happened. And they also know this about human nature, which is why I said this is at least as much about human psychology as it is about the human body. The physiology is that guys there's a problem that guys are not going to give up this jealousy unless they can go through a ritual that actually cures them of their jealousy. So as much as this is a ritual to help a woman or help the society know whether a woman's committed adultery and punish a woman or whatever you want to say, caste system, this whatever, this hierarchy, this patriarchy, whatever, it also does actually protect the woman, because what it's saying is once the woman goes through this ritual and she comes out clean, he's done. He can't do anything more. He's played his cards. What?
You always can.
I don't know. Look,
Let me ask you a question.
part of the problem is that if people believe that God can do these kinds of things, then do you really want to make God? Do you really want to try it? So for people who believe that God did these kinds of things, well, this is the way I look at it. I could be wrong, but I've read a lot of stuff, and I've read at least commentaries on this section and other sections of the Torah that sometimes we look at it going, why would anyone do this? I do come away with this. If 200 years ago and beyond, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, nobody understands bacteria, nobody understands tumors, nobody understands cells, cell division. When you see stuff happen, don't you ascribe a lot of that to God? And so as much as I think, a lot of our belief today is in science, right? We put a lot of our energy and our faith and our mind on science. And I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor is going to cure me. If you don't have that option, you go to a guy selling you snake oil. You go to the priest and hope that the priest can talk to God and get you healthy. So I'm not 100% sure that it's easy. It's not really easy for us to go back and say, what idiots, because if that's your frame of mind already, I don't know that you really don't believe that this is going to happen. It's hard for me to judge. It's hard for me to say to somebody, you're an idiot if you believe that this was going to happen, because when you're literally tying a red ribbon around your wrist to protect you from a demon, why not?
I remember that kind of little, anecdote about this root, way back when, and when
Yeah.
the science developed, they realized that
The root,
after all this,
the root actually had something? Yeah.
Or you have to spell everything else. But in this case, the guy who, which he may or may not have had this relationship, doesn't get any consequence out of this at all, right? At least from what I'm seeing.
Well, yes, but here's the issue. If they then could find the guy, like if then they know that it did happen, then they would have punished the guy.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, as John said, did it ever happen? The rabbis, especially nowadays, when they're honest about it, Some would say, oh yeah, this never worked. They never happened. No woman ever had this happen.
So let me backtrack. There's a sentence here about witnesses. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So did people bring witnesses? Was it cross
Yeah.
examination?
Oh, yeah.
So they had trials,
Yes.
as hokey as they might have been.
Yes. Yes. There were trials. And the rabbis get even more intricate into the trials because they describe the witnesses. And then you have to have witnesses to the witnesses, and then you have to have witnesses to the witnesses to the witnesses. So yeah, you have to go all the way through. Look, essentially, by the time they're done with the trial, everyone in the town has been called as a witness. But they also have courts that are made up of a minimum of 3 judges, right? Some of the trials had like 100 judges, 80 judges on a capital case. The Sanhedrin would be called to, they'd have these guys to come together as a group, 100 guys come together to judge sometimes these cases. So it's not just that there was witnesses, there was also more people in the court to judge this. And so you got to think that there was a high level of, cross-examination and investigation into what was happening. And they took it seriously. We took it seriously. And the Talmud's not legend. Well, I mean, there's legend in the Talmud. There's definitely legend there. But the Talmud is like referring to things that actually happened. When they got a group of people together to decide these kinds of things, that they had a lot of people. This is serious.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Was the Sanhedrin, were they regularly having?
Well,
Or is this something?
no, there was a time when the Sanhedrin would have gotten together.
Yeah.
In this case, remember, this isn't the Sanhedrin. This is originally the priests. So the Sanhedrin didn't do this, but in capital cases or in cases where, they're even, they're investigating maybe an adultery situation where, again, there's capital situation here, but they didn't do this. The rabbis were never entitled to do this. They were never entitled to run the sotah ritual. They weren't. The priests were allowed to, and once there was no longer a temple or a tabernacle, how would you even have the dirt in order to do this? So you couldn't just do it. But again, the waters had a magical, they had a magical property, and however they worked, there was a way to make this up. There's actually
You should show the folks that are on there the Sanhedrin. Can you imagine a woman, the Wikipedia?
Yeah.
In front of 23 people like that? It's stressful enough just to get pulled over by a policeman.
Yeah, it would have been stressful. This is
picture.
this is a book. This is a book, by the way, called Sotah that came out a few years ago. Some of you may have written this book. Beautiful, fragile Dina Reich, a young woman in Jerusalem's ultra-Orthodox Haredi enclave, stands accused of the community's most unforgivable sin, adultery. Dina secretly yearned for knowledge, romance, and etc. So, this was a book called Sotah, which they actually used the title. So Naomi Roggins she wrote a lot of books. Before there was Shtisel, there was Naomi Roggin who wrote these books. I think they may have turned it into I think they did turn. Yeah. So Sotah is a very well-read book. But yeah, so the Sanhedrin couldn't do this Sotah ritual, but they could inquire into an adultery case, and there would be a punishment for it. So there wouldn't even be, this kind of situation where they wouldn't have, to some extent, there's no need for a trial in this case because the magical waters do the job. But we call this woman the Sotah. There's an entire tractate of the Talmud called Sotah. There's an entire tractate of the Talmud. Now, it's not all about Sotah, because no tractate of the Talmud is about what it's supposed to be about. There's discussions and there's great things in Sotah that have nothing to do with an adulterous woman. But that's where it started from. It starts from a discussion on how we do this today. How do we figure out a Sotah and deal with that when we don't have a temple anymore? So it starts off with what the Torah says, and then the rabbis, come up with understandings of this. So this, again, was something that the rabbis couldn't do anymore, but they didn't want to do it because they know that this is, especially today. So let's just finish what happens. The priest shall put these curses down in writing and rub it off in the water of bitterness, right? So he also takes the words of this curse and puts it into the water. So he rubs the text off into the water with what this is going to do. He's to make the woman drink the bitter water of bitterness that induces the spell. So the spell-inducing water may enter into her to bring on bitterness. Then the priest shall take the woman's hand, the meal offering of jealousy, elevate the meal offering before the Lord and present it on the altar. The priest shall scoop out of the meal offering a token part of it and turn it into smoke on the altar. Last, he shall make the woman drink the water. Once he has made her drink the water, if she has defiled herself by breaking faith with her husband, the spell-inducing water shall enter into her to bring on bitterness. But her belly shall distend and her thigh shall sag, and the wife shall become a curse among her people. Which is weird too, because wouldn't she be killed? But in this case, it's like her punishment is this. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is pure, she shall be unharmed and able to retain seed. This is the ritual in cases of jealousy, when a woman goes astray while living in her husband's household and defiles herself. And you notice here it says living in her husband's household is what, yeah, it's just the same phrase that said above. Or when a fit of jealousy comes over her husband and he is wrought up over his wife, the woman shall be made to stand before Adonai, and the priest shall carry out the ritual with her.
What does it mean the man will be clear of guilt? You're talking about the husband or
The man shall be clear of guilt, but the woman shall suffer for her guilt. Now, that's your question, right? The party who initiated the proceeding, right? The ish, that's her husband. So it uses the word ish here, which the man is the man who accused her. So this is really a way to allow a woman, as John said, did it ever happen? Did the magical waters ever make a woman, did they ever do that?
I can believe it.
If it didn't, then it allows the woman, no matter what, she was able to come back into the community. So many people say, well, this is a terrible thing because it puts a woman on the spot and makes her go through this ritual. And what's the punishment for the guy, and et cetera. Well, the reality is that it's really to clear her. It's really to allow her to come back to the community, unless she did something wrong, in which case there's going to be consequences. So I think most people look at it as, well, it's kind of an archaic ritual. It's kind of a magical ritual. It's kind of whatever. But at the end of the day, they also look at the psychology of this. Look at the idea here of clearing the guilt of the woman.
Works every time. I mean, maybe
It does.
You know, there's some physiological effects in it for person.
Psychosomatic? Yeah.
Nervous.
Yeah.
And maybe it causes the effect.
Not for witness.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta assume it's 100% correct. It was just.
Yeah,
what I
that
would
was,
say.
you have impeachment. You know,
And
I
so-
don't know.
And so, no, but people would have to deal with the consequences of all of those things. But again, bearing false witness is one of the 10 commandments. You're breaking one of the 10 commandments. Now, here's another law that we're never supposed to nowadays get into. And this is the law of the Nazarite. So chapter 6 is another one of those laws that we're never supposed to do. So like the Sota, here's the Nazarite. Well, it's worse than that. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if any men or women, and again, here it's telling us that men or women could be, right, a participant, a participant whose involvement, well, it's basically somebody who utters the Nazarite vow, and it could, according to this, again, it could either be a man or a woman. They shall abstain from wine and any other intoxicant. Okay. We know that, yain or shechar, that is alcohol. They shall not drink vinegar of wine or any other intoxicant. That is interesting too. Chometz yain, chometz, right? Which is the word chametz, right? Something that's been able to become, has some oxidization, and it's either fermented, right? Oxidized. Or
Rabbi?
drink anything in which grapes have been steeped, nor eat grapes, fresh or dried, mean raisins or grapes, or any kind of seed of a grape is off limits. This is not just wine. It's not just
Rabbi?
alcohol.
Sign up.
Yeah.
Can I just go back, because my version to, verse, 2?
Hmm.
Verse 2, mine says, if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of separation to the Lord as a Nazirite. I don't think, what does Torah say?
Um,
Oh, okay, it's a little different.
yeah, it says neder. It says make a vow. Nor neder. It's a vow of a Nazir, lahazir Adonai. And again, the word Nazir is repeated in 2 forms, and the word neder, vow, is used 2 times. So Nazir, lahazir. So the word for Mary, what does yours say? Set themselves apart?
Separate themselves to vow and vow.
Yeah. Yeah. So separation is definitely an idea of the root of the word lahazir or nazir. This is not what Jesus was, not a Nazarite. Jesus was from Nazareth, which is a different word. It's notsri. It's with a tzadi, not with a zayin. It's a different letter. It sounds similar in English, but it's not. Nazarites, exactly. As Don says, the most famous one is Samson. And we actually read the story of Samson when we read this Parsha. So this is the Haftarah. We read a little bit of Samson, which is a story of a guy who's told he's going to be a Nazarite. That's different from what happens here. This is something that normally a person does themselves. They vow. Samson had no choice. His mother was told by an angel, your son will be born. She was not supposed to have a son. She was beyond the childbearing years like the other women, like Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel. But in order for this all to go through, she also has to promise that he'll always be a Nazarite, not to cut his hair, not to have wine, alcohol. It seems like Samson doesn't really have a problem with the wine and alcohol and the hair cutting on his own. He has a problem with ladies. And they're the ones who cause him to get his hair cut and maybe drink alcohol and do other stuff that gets him into trouble and has him lose his power. But this is not something that people were normally supposed to do. So why did they do it? Why did they do this craziness? Why would they make a vow? Notice what Rashi says. Why do we talk about Nazarites just after we talk to Sota? To tell you that he who was once seen as a Sota in her disgrace should abstain from wine because it may lead to adultery. That's one reason why they're next to each other. But there is also this idea that people are they are deciding to do this for a reason that they want to keep themselves apart from other people. I'm trying to look if there's one here. One of his Rashi's, one of these explanations. No, it's not there. But again, the rabbis don't like this because they don't want people to do this. They don't want people to make a vow. They don't want people to do this.
Is that converted?
No, they don't want them to make promises in God's name that they have to follow. And essentially create a situation where they can get themselves into trouble by breaking the vow. And so they don't want people to do this. The rabbis at least didn't want people to do this. They didn't like it. And once they're no longer priests, there's really no way to get out of it. So they really didn't have people do this. This also kind of begs the question again, too. Did Judaism encourage, these more kind of ascetic movements like hermits, monks, people who vowed things of chastity? Talk about the Essenes. We went to the place in Qumran where the Dead Sea Scrolls were written. Guys that were living apart from everyone else, setting themselves apart. The rabbis generally don't like this kind of behavior. They don't want people to do this. Even when they're studying, even when they're deep in mystical thought, they don't like the idea that people will do this, which is one of the reasons why they say that people aren't even supposed to start studying the Kabbalah until they're 30 years old, until they've already been married and have a family. They do not want people to separate themselves off like this. People have always done this. Well, I shouldn't say always, but from the ancient world, we know that people did this. When early Christians decided to create monasteries and convents, it didn't come from Christianity. It came from some forms of Judaism, especially the Essenes, and it also came from other faiths. It came from Vestal virgins. That was a Roman thing. That wasn't a Jewish thing. We didn't have groups of Jewish women that could vow a vow of celibacy and set themselves off to serve a god. The Romans did. And people have looked at that transition from Vestal virgins to nunneries and said, oh, there never was a time when they didn't have that in ancient Rome. They went right from having Vestal virgins to having nuns. And people know that. Judaism, at least from the rabbinic period on, didn't like to have this. And again, the laws in the Torah are here because people obviously did it. And even the Torah wants to kind of limit, to some extent, I think, how this happens. And they know that it's very hard. And they don't want people to put themselves in a situation where they're putting more laws on themselves and giving up more things. Look, I get into arguments with Orthodox Jews sometimes that tell me that I'm wrong for being a vegetarian because I shouldn't be giving up more things. That giving up things that God puts in this world is not a sin, but it's not what we're supposed to be doing. Well, look, the problem is once God gives us permission to eat them, then the argument was you're supposed to eat them because, I'm just telling you the mindset, which obviously, if the more religious you are, it's not like it's supposed to give you license to go nuts, right? You're not supposed to go crazy and just indulge in everything. As a matter of fact, traditional Judaism teaches us to have control over our desires, our carnal needs to some extent, and our not going crazy. But look, there's a reason why Jews can get drunk on Purim and on Simchas Torah, and why they can have a good time, because we're not supposed to deny ourselves things that we're supposed to see as a gift from God, which is why, again, some people tell me I shouldn't be a vegetarian. I mean, I feel comfortable enough about it, but they see that as something like this, which is becoming like a Nazarite. And look, there is something that's obnoxious about vegetarians too, which is that, this idea that they have some kind of power because they're no longer eating animals. It's maybe the closest thing to, I'm just saying, not Nazarite, but it's the closest thing to a Nazarite vow that you can do to some extent, which is give yourself, what?
Supposed to improve.
Well, it proves everything. There's no level of where you're not, where you look at it and you go, oh, you're not getting something out of it. But I will tell you that is where people sometimes say, what's the modern equivalent of it? It could be that. You could also say, somebody's a teetotaler today. If someone says, I'm never going to drink alcohol, and again, sometimes people think that could get a little obnoxious too, but no one would go, you're a terrible person because you never drink. But there's there are people who, who say, oh, that's what I don't want to do. What? I don't trust them. But I think, what? Not according to the Torah. They didn't, because they're not given permission to eat animals until after Noah. There's not even a clear idea that anyone for the first 10 generations had anything besides the animal product. But anyways, look, we don't know. The point is that they definitely sacrificed, because Cain and Abel offer up sacrifices, and they killed an animal because Abel killed an animal to offer up as a sacrifice. So I don't know. I look, I'm only telling you that I feel comfortable with it, but there's people who'd say it's type of.
Not every Orthodox Jew feels that way.
No.
So I have a friend in Toronto that Europe Orthodox is more conservative towards the Orthodox, and he's a vegan.
I would say that that it's not I would say in a positive way, it's more common amongst modern Orthodox that the desire to be vegetarian, to some extent, like with me, which was, I don't want to discuss it and have to get into kashrut with people, that if I'm a vegetarian, I never have to have that discussion again. That's one of the reasons. And they also feel, look, a lot of modern Orthodox are kind of more conscious about climate change and, the environment and stuff like that. So they're gonna dig that. I would say that the more ultra Orthodox you go, the less likely you're gonna find a vegetarian or vegan amongst those people. Generally speaking, and there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, in the really, really Orthodox communities, Black hat communities, vegetarianism is not very commonly practiced, and to some extent, I would even say looked down upon. And again, it's not like everyone is like that, but look, I've had discussions with my friend Honi out here, from Chabad, who's joked with me. He says, yeah, Mark, I'm a member of PETA, people enjoying tasty animals. That's what he says. I'm a member of PETA. So he does that to me. He does that to me we've had the discussion many times, but well, and sometimes he doesn't say it. He'll say it in front of me, but he laughs. But we have a disagreement over that. But the reality is that it can be obnoxious sometimes, and it's difficult. Sometimes I go through elements of it where I think when I was a little bit more stringent about it, I wouldn't even let people come into the house and I mean, they can't eat meat or whatever on our plates, obviously, but I wouldn't even have them come in. I used to eat, like, if my niece and nephew would come over and, or watch them wherever, and they came over to our house, they'd have to eat their stuff outside. I wouldn't let them eat it. I don't know if they've eaten it inside, but they had, they ate a paper plate or their bag, whatever. They had a hamburger. They didn't come in the house. They didn't come in the house with that. But I think I've let them come in now. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but they wouldn't eat on our plates. But I don't think I can make them sit outside like I used to. No, I did. I used to say, you're not coming in with that. But I mean, it was just, we just didn't have it. And I guess maybe I also didn't want to have two sets of plates and stuff. And what is that? And I eat non-kosher meat anyways. Yeah, my kids they've never even had a hankering for it. They haven't had a slip. I'm not saying they haven't done, I'm not saying they have never done anything wrong. John, I'm not saying they're saints. I'm just saying when it comes to that, no, they actually have been very, they've been very excited about it. And they are the kind of kids that they like that they're vegetarian. They've always liked that they were. And they've encouraged their friends, whatever, told them, they're not say you should be, but like, you can do it. This is how I do it. And they just, for example, all three of them just went to Disney World last week. All three just went together. And the big thing that they did was they went to all the plant-based foods that they had at Disney World, because Disney World has an amazing amount of vegetarian stuff now, plant-based stuff. They went to some new Toy Story themed restaurant where they had plant-based ribs and plant-based stuff, and they said it was great. So they loved it. They loved doing that. So look, I've thought about it, like, what if they decided to eat meat and look, I'm not going to disown them, and I wouldn't say I wouldn't be a little disappointed, but it is hard because, like, Rachel has a serious boyfriend for the last 5 years, and he's not a vegetarian, but he doesn't eat meat when he's with us. Actually, I'm not sure about that. I don't think he does, and oftentimes he won't eat meat when they're together, but he hasn't gone over to become a vegetarian. So who knows? I mean, I don't know what will happen for them when they raise their own kids, but man, we'll see. We'll see if it's a part of our family tradition. I wasn't born vegetarian, but I've been vegetarian now for over half my life, and it's been one of the things that I'm proud of. And again, getting back to this, it's the closest thing to a Nazirite vow that I've ever done, because I took it on myself. No, but there's veggie corned beef now. So I eat a veggie corned beef. It's not so bad, but I put it on myself. And that's what these guys did. They put it on themselves. By the way, I could become a Nazirite much easier than was for me to be a vegetarian, because I ate a lot more meat than I did eating grape juice. And I'm not a big wine drinker. So if I never had a glass of wine again, I'd be fine. I'm not one of these people that I'll make it kiddish and stuff like that, but these Nazirites couldn't even make it kiddish over grape juice.
And I decided to keep kosher.
Yeah.
One of my thoughts was, this is a commitment I can keep. Whereas other commitments I might not keep.
Interesting. And how long did you do it for?
Keeping kosher
Mm-hmm.
from the time I was 30 until today.
Wow.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Almost 50.
Yeah. So our ancestors, by our ancestors, I mean our grandparents and great grandparents, they didn't really have a choice. They never thought about not keeping kosher. So for them, not eating kosher stuff wasn't an issue. It really wasn't an issue until about 150 years ago. No one ever wasn't an issue. So they never thought about it. But yeah, now we do think about it. Now, to some extent, if we do make a decision to keep kosher or be vegetarian, we're doing it. Now, of course, what's the other thing they have to do? Oh, throughout the term of their vow as a Nazirite, no razor shall touch their head. It shall remain consecrated until the completion of their term as a Nazirite, the hair of their head being left to grow untrimmed. Throughout the term that the person may set apart for Adonai, they shall not go in where there is a dead person. Now, what's interesting about these two lines here is that the words are Kol Yemei Neder, all the days of their Nazirite time. Kol Yemei, all the terms that they have Haziru, how they've set themselves apart for that time, for that, and they translated it as term. The words literally are all the days. Mary, what does the King James say there? Yeah, so that's what it literally means, which seems to imply that maybe it's going to be forever. If you say that it's a term, that means that, like, it's a set amount of time and I'm taking that time off, and once it's over, it's over. It could be that was the case where Nazirite said, I'm doing this for a year, I'm doing this for 6 months, I'm following a Nazirite vow, and that's it. And again, it could be that it was always for a term, but it also could be, as long as you could translate it as long as the person is Nazirite, or as long as the person is set aside, they don't go amongst a dead person, which means it could be forever if that's how long they said never. Cohen can't for their family, right?
But it's right.
The high priest can't go in for anybody.
Oh, really?
Your nearby relatives you can, but not if you're the Kohen Gadol, even for your parents or for your siblings. Correct. But for your parents and family, if you're just a regular Kohen, you can go. Not for a Nazirite. Even if their father or mother or their brother or sister should die, they must not become defiled for any of them, since hair set apart for their God is upon their head. And so this seems to have something to do with, again, let's just look at this note here, his consecration unto God. It's pretty much the same thing. The word here is, this is their hair is for God. So they can't come into contact throughout their term as Nazirite, as they are consecrated to Adonai. If someone dies nearby, defiling the consecrated hair, The Nazarite shall shave the head at the time of becoming pure, shaving it on the 7th day. And on the 8th day, the person shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, and make expiation on the person's behalf for the guilt incurred through the corpse. That same day, the head shall be reconsecrated, and that person shall rededicate to Adonai the term as a Nazarite, bring the lamb in its first year as a penalty offering. The previous period shall be void, since the consecrated hair was defiled. And so there you can see that if a person came into contact with a dead person, they have to start over. Their term is starting over, which again makes it seem like this is a certain amount of time, like it's a year or a 6-month period or whatever it was, that the term they set aside was not going to be for the rest of their lives. It was not a lifetime vow. If there's a previous period that's void, those first days are voided out. So it seems as though, again, at least in the case of someone who was only doing it for a certain period of time, they had to restart.
Why in the world they do it for a certain period of time? It's not a lifelong thing. I mean,
Again, probably one of the ways that they did it, or one of the reasons or the motivations, was because they had either done something wrong or wanted to do some. I mean, we don't know for sure, but based on what we can kind of surmise from, there's discussion about this in the Talmud too, about Nazarites. There's a tractate on the Nazir. So why did people do it? Probably to make up for something that they had done, that they wanted to cleanse themselves from, somebody that they've wronged, something that they had done where they felt like they needed to go through some type of yeah. And this is the way they did it, was by also not cutting their hair. So it seems as though the hair part is actually super important for their status. And so they go through that process of cutting their hair. Look, if you accidentally took in, let's finish this Nazarite stuff up and I'll show you. This is the ritual for the Nazarite. On the day the term as Nazarite is completed, the person shall be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. As an offering to Adonai, that person shall present 1 male lamb in its first year without blemish for a burnt offering, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish for a sin offering, 1 ram without blemish for an offering of well-being, a basket of unleavened cakes of choice flour with oil mixed in, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and the proper meal offerings and libations. So based on all of this, it seems as though the person did it at their Nazarite vows because they felt that they had to do it. It's not so much that they wanted to do it. It's not so much that they felt like, hey, I want to be a holier person, but that they felt like in this way, they're going to cleanse themselves. They're going to be purified, that they're going to make up for something that they've done, that they really want to figure out a way to do it. And it seems to me like people still have that, they want to do something to fix something that they had done in the past. Whatever it was. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people do that today. They feel like they were on the wrong path, whatever the reason was that they want to restart. They wanted to do something with their lives to allow themselves to do this. Now, this is at least from the standpoint that they're not cutting their hair. Everybody knows that they're a Nazarite. This is something that people would see the person and go, oh yeah, that guy's got his Nazarite vow, or she's got her Nazarite vow going. So people knew about it. And it seems like when it's over, then they can be cleansed by offering up these things that they're offering up, their sacrifices that they're offering up, which would be the sacrifices that would cleanse them from the things that they had done wrong. An offering for sin, an offering of well-being. These are the things we read about in Leviticus, a chatat offering, a shlemim offering. So they're bringing this at the end of their time. So in addition to offering up sacrifices, they needed to do something physically to help themselves purify and to come back and, to feel whole again. So the priest shall present them before Adonai in an offer and offer the sin offering and the burnt offering. He shall offer the ram as a sacrifice of well-being to Adonai, together with a basket of matzot, right? There's matzahs. The cakes, the unleavened cakes. The priest shall also offer the meal offerings and the libation. The Nazirite shall then shave the consecrated hair at the entrance of the tent of meeting and take those locks of consecrated hair and put them on the fire that is under the sacrifice of well-being. So they actually now burnt up their hair, which they grew while they were Nazirite. And so that's really interesting that now that hair essentially is almost like an offering too. Well, not like, it is an offering. So their hair essentially grew out. And as the hair grew out, maybe they can feel like now they're having a fresh start. They shave their head, the hair goes on the fire, it burns up, and now they feel like they've grown, or they've grown out that hair, and now they've purified themselves. Interesting idea. The priest shall take the shoulder of the ram when it has been boiled, one unleavened cake from the basket, one unleavened wafer, and place them on the hands of the Nazirite after the consecrated hair has been shaved. So again, the person holds their offering, just like the sotah holds the offering. This Nazirite would hold the offering. He or she would hold the offering. Could be a woman. The priest shall elevate them as an elevation offering before Adonai, and this shall be a sacred donation for the priest in addition to the breast of the elevation offering and the thigh of the gift offering. After that, Nazirite may drink wine. Such is the obligation of a Nazirite, except that those who vow an offering to Adonai of what they can afford beyond the Nazirite requirements must do exactly according to the vow that they have made beyond their obligation as Nazirites, which means that people oftentimes also did something else. They also promised something else. So what they can afford, something they also said that they would give. That is the end of the Nazirite vow. That's the end of the Nazirite discussion. So what else do we want to say about this? As we said, we read Samson when we read this, because to some extent, we read the story of the most famous Nazirite. And we also kind of see that it was part of his downfall, right? His Nazirite vow ends up costing him his strength. Yeah, from his whole life. I mean, he's raised as a Nazirite, and he is essentially a miracle because of that Nazirite vow, and has this amazing strength and this power because of his hair. His hair is cut, he loses his power. So it's kind of like the best case study of a Nazirite. But of course, it's not a great story. It's not a great story.
Or if you did, what's the point of being strict if you're so, you veered off path and, the way you did that.
Yeah, and I think the more we read the Nazirite story the story of Samson and his Nazirite vows a while ago, but we did read it in the book of Judges. It's a bad story because it's almost as if Samson was doomed from the very beginning, which is kind of sad when you think about it, because the people were all messed up. They were serving the Philistines. They were being punished. Samson is their judge, is their redeemer, is their leader, but he's a really flawed character. And he's part of his vow, which is not really his vow. I mean, it's his parent. I mean, he didn't have a choice in the matter. It's almost like he's an agent of destruction that is put into motion from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most tragic stories in the Bible. There's two really tragic stories I mean, the book of Judges is filled with kind of sad stories, but the two tragic stories in it are Samson's story and the story of Jephthah, and more importantly, Jephthah's daughter, who ends up being sacrificed. Those two stories almost seem like, they're kind of modern day stories like we'd have today of anti-heroes or people who are doing what they have to do, but you don't want them to, you don't want it to happen, but you see it happening and it's a train wreck.
Samson just had anger management.
Well, yeah, but look, did he have a choice? Samson, everything that Samson does to some extent, he's like forced into it. He ends up killing Philistines because, they trick him into answering a riddle, which he also didn't necessarily. I mean, everything about it is a tragedy. It's like, it's always going to be a problem. And so it's sad because it seems like one of those stories, like a Greek myth where you're like, oh, this is just bad. This is just a tragedy. And it seems like it was destiny, right? It's fate. But it's really not like a lot of the stories in the Bible, which aren't always happy ending stories, but at least they're stories of redemption or somebody making the best of their situation. These are just stories of people that were doomed almost. So the Nazarites are like the one example of a Nazarite we have in the Bible is so bad that we kind of step back and go, hey, do we really want to do that? Do you really, think about the consequences of what you're doing here? It's not a good situation for Nazarites, at least the Samson story. And the rabbis kind of like, they're cautioning people about doing that. And as I said, about doing any kind of vow, where you're giving up something where you really shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't be invoking God's name, and you shouldn't be say, hey, I swear to God that if you help me out, God, that I promise I'll do such and such and such. The rabbis don't think you ever should do that. So don't do that. Because if you wind up not doing it, it creates a really bad situation for yourself. So don't do it. Don't try not to do it. Don't do it, Don. No, if you do it, but if you do it, you're gonna set yourself on a path where, you're gonna be doomed if you make up promises for God. Don't do it. So now we get to the most famous part of this, because it's the most famous part because we do it all the time. God spoke to Moses and said, speak to Aaron and his sons, and thus shall you bless the people of Israel, and say to them, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And there we have the priestly benediction. Birkat Kohanim, what we're supposed to say to our families every week, every Shabbos, what we're the highest blessing we can give to people. Well, he says Aaron is supposed to say this to the people and to the priest, right? And then it says, thus, and the last line is, thus shall they link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless them. So importantly, it's not the priests that are blessing them. I'm blessing them, right? And the blessing says, may God bless you. It doesn't say I bless you. It says every line, God is blessing you. So the priests are not blessing the people. God is blessing them. They're invoking God's blessing. What? Well, according to this, the priests are the ones who are going to do it. But again, the tradition is that parents can say it to their kids. People can say it. Okay, so I just want to tell you, open up your Haggadah, and it says that people can say this to their families on Passover. But okay, I'm just saying. So yes, there's a tradition even today in Orthodox synagogues where the Kohanim bless the people on the high holidays with these blessings, with this threefold blessing. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, and the people say, Ken yehi ratzon. May this be God's will. Adonai bless you and protect you. It's in our prayer book. It's the Ken yehi ratzon part is in our prayer book too. Adonai deal kindly and graciously with you, and then Adonai bestow divine favor upon you and grant you peace. That's the translation we have. Mary, what does yours say for bless you and keep you? Is it keep you or guard you? Keep you, right? Keep thee, right? Keep you. So the word shamor is to protect or guard. It's like vishamru. It's like shomer, a police person or a guard is a shomer. And so God is blessing you and protecting you. May God bless you and protect you. Notice the first line is three words. Two things, bless and keep you. The next line says, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha. And again, this is now five words in this line. God's lighting you up. Ya'er has the connotation of light, which is why this translation is really not very nice, because it doesn't keep that, which is definitely in the King James. Because Mary, what does your King James say? Ya'er Adonai. Yeah. Yeah. May God's light shine down upon you. Ya'er is the word or, right? Light. And so there should be somewhere in here of light, right? John, what does your translation there say? For line 25.
Feel kindly.
Yeah, it's because this, yeah, well, see, there they have the note. Oh, they do have the note here. Sorry. There's the asterisk. Make his face shine upon thee and be gracious to you. Yes. So the word here, panav, is God's face, which is why may God's face light on you, like God's light. But panav has the idea of face towards you, because we use the same word in English, right? When we say a face is your face, but facing is also turning towards, right? It's facing, right? We say you're facing that direction. We know it's not literally your face, but you're turned towards that direction. So God is turned towards you, but it's God's light turning towards you. And the word hunecha is from the word chen or Hana, the name Hana, or Yochanan, means grace. So the word grace always is going to be there, or should always be there, because that's definitely the word for grace. How we translate the word grace, or what the word grace means for us, that's an interesting question, because we use the word grace, and actually oftentimes when we hear the word grace, people say, that sounds like a Christian word. What does grace mean? What? Grace before meals, grace Baptist. Sounds, there are not a lot of Jewish graces. I just want to point out, there are some, but there are not many. It's not a very Jewish name. But the name Anna or Hannah is a pretty Jewish name. So we use the word in Hebrew, right? Annette, there's a lot of, there's a lot of Hannahs, right? And there's a lot of people that had the name Yochanan or John in their names. But the word grace, what does it mean? What does it mean when it says, may God deal graciously with you? So again, I've heard Christian sermons on the word grace a lot. Actually, I heard one of my friends, I went down to my friend John Shaver's church months ago to talk about our Israel trip when we went to Israel. But he did a little sermon about grace, what grace means. And I said, after he was done, I said, it's coincidental. Well, it's not coincidental. His name, John, means grace. It's perfect person to talk about the word grace. But in Hebrew, it seems to be chen or chan, the name for the word grace actually seems to be more the idea that God will, or when people show grace to someone, it actually is more of like giving them the benefit of the doubt. Grace is actually in Hebrew kind of connected to the idea of cutting someone a break, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, or the kindness of accepting them for who they are, or accepting themselves for who they are, or accepting the situation for the way it is, and having some kind of accommodation with that. And we oftentimes say, that person's very gracious. Almost means like hospitable, or they're very giving. But in kind of reality, at least the word chen in Hebrew is almost more like, that person really lived life with grace, was a certain amount of, by the way, when we say someone's graceful, it almost means like they're a ballet dancer, or they're somebody that has a lot, they walk really nicely. But grace actually, the sense in Hebrew isn't one of dignity or necessarily composure or poise, but really one more of acceptance, being able to say, hey, that person dealt with this situation with a lot of grace. They were nice to people, and they were nice to themselves, and they were, not so sad all the time with their situation, that they were gracious. And so when we ask God to be gracious with us, we're asking God's grace, that God will be graceful, that God will be nice to you, but really that God will, that's why it says kindly, but that God will be gracious to you, that God will cut you a break. So God will bless you and keep you. God's light will be on you and give you goodness and give you that extra benefit, or at least the benefit of the doubt. The last line is Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'asem lecha shalom, that God will turn towards you. The word Yisa has this understanding of turning towards the face. The Yisa is that God is turning the face towards you and will give you peace. Now, yes, comes from the Hebrew. Panav or panim is a face, right? Which is interesting because the word panim in Hebrew has a plural, right? So it's interesting that in panim
Means your two face.
means you have two sides of your face. But yeah, it is a plural. But there are other words that have plural. Lips are plural too. Eyes are plural. Yes, true. So panim is God's face, right? But it's always God's face. That God's face will be turned towards you. So here, God's face will light towards you, will be lit towards you, and that God's energy will be towards you. Because when it says when God turned towards you, it actually means like God's energy is turning towards you, that God is going to radiate this energy and power to you and give you shalom. Now, again, we always know shalom means peace. Here it says friendship. It could be because it could be a friendship. Shalom is a connection, but shalom also has a sense of wholeness. It has a sense of peace through contentment and give you what you need to feel whole. And so that's the way I look at the prayer. I mean, that when I look at what does the prayer actually say, those things are included in the prayer. That God's going to protect you and bless you, give you blessings, that God's light is going to be towards you and you'll be given grace by God. God will give you grace. And that God's energy will be towards you and that you'll have that sense of wholeness, that sense of peace as God turned towards you, that you'll feel that the energy that God gives you will be enough to give you a sense of wholeness. And that's not my interpretation of it. I think that's the kind of the literal meaning of it. I think those are the elements of this that are there. It's 3 lines, 3 words, 5 lines, 3 words, 5 words, 7 words. It's clearly structured that way. It's structured in a way so that the lines get bigger. They get bigger as they go down, right? As they fill up. It's like a pyramid, if you will. Power.
Oh, I mean, this,
Yeah, so according to tradition, the Kohanim would bless the people like this while they held it out with the rays of energy going towards the people.
all Balkans are Kohanim.
Well, they're that because Spock saw it. Spock talked about how he saw this. Spock, yes, Leonard Nimoy saw it when he was a kid, because you were not supposed to look at the Kohanim when they blessed you, and he felt like he did it and wasn't supposed to do it. And so when it came time for him to come up with his Vulcan salute, that's what he came up with. And he very open about saying he took it from the Kohanim. So that is that, yeah, he says this is a example of a Jewish tradition that became more well known as a sci-fi tradition than it is a Jewish tradition, because most Jews they don't know. And so when you see gravestones of Kohanim, they oftentimes have this on the tombstone. The tombstone will actually have the way that the Kohanim bless. That'll be an indication that a Kohen is buried there. So when you see this on a grave, on a tombstone, you won't see him over in Eden or Mount Sinai very often. Sometimes you will, but you will see them in old cemeteries. You will see them in cemeteries in Germany or in Russia, or where cemeteries have survived the war. Because remember, Poland and Ukraine, and a lot of those cemeteries were absolutely completely run over and destroyed, and they used the headstones for paving tiles, and so you won't see those cemeteries anymore. But they obliterated our dead. But the old cemeteries that survived, you'll see these. You'll see it at the cemetery in Prague. Yeah, some of the older cemeteries there, where they put symbols on, but the Kohanim had that as their symbol. So the priests would bless the people with this blessing. And again, in synagogues, traditionally, that's what they still do. The oldest prayer that was ever found, that's ever been discovered, that's ever been excavated, is this very prayer. So I'm going to show you the, let me show it to you right here.
Growing up in the Christian church,
Uh-huh.
that's the last prayer that the pastor would always say as well before we departed.
That's absolutely true, Glory. Thanks for sharing that too. It is true. In what services?
Christian,
Not all.
Lutheran,
Services, yes. Catholic services, yes. Not all Protestant services do, but the ones that kind of hew towards the Catholic tradition more, that is said at at the cemetery, at the funeral, at the burial. Yeah, interesting, right? So it's interesting that that prayer to some extent has been incorporated into burial. This is the piece that we found. This was found in the outside of Jerusalem, the Ketef Hinnom scroll, an amulet from the first temple period containing the priestly blessing. You can see this at the Israel Museum. The scroll is the earliest known artifact written in Paleo Hebrew alphabet. So this is written in the ancient Hebrew script.
So was it part of the Dead Sea Scroll?
No, it's older. It's the oldest scroll that was ever, it's the oldest text ever found in Hebrew. And it was found just outside of Jerusalem. The Ketef Hinnom scroll was found, you can see right here, 600 BC. It's 2,600 years old. No, but it was only discovered in 1979, and it's in silver. It was written in an amulet. It was placed in some kind of amulet, and it was found. Yeah, it was found in Ketef Hinnom, right outside of Tel Aviv. I mean, right outside of Jerusalem. It's Tel Aviv University found it. So, yep. So, these are the lines. So, and so you can see these lines right here. It measures 11 by 39, so it's half an inch by about an inch and a half. We think that this was a amulet, right? We think that this was rolled up, put into a like a little container and worn around someone's neck like a mezuzah. So think about this. This is the earliest text that we've ever found in ancient Hebrew. The earliest Jewish text that we've ever found is this prayer. Well, I could if I had somebody helping me with the lines of what's missing, because it's not, you saw it's missing, it's not 100% there. So these guys who are archaeologists, yeah, but it's hard for me to know, like, oh, that's what was missing. So yeah. But so to me, I can like decipher the symbols and I go, okay, that's a chet, that's a yud. I can figure that, I can see the letters in my head. But look, we've found so few fragments that are that old. I mean, that is older than, well, here's the interesting thing. The argument of how old the Torah is, how long ago the Torah was edited into the form that we have, meaning Genesis through Deuteronomy, edited together. Look, that text is older than Josiah, probably. That was before Josiah. So if Josiah was the one who was responsible for the book of Deuteronomy, that scroll is older than the book of Deuteronomy. That's how old the scroll is. So it's possible that it's older than the Torah itself. So that's what's so crazy about that blessing. I know, but I'm just saying that's how old it is. It's so old that when you think about that text,
It's incredible that it survived, and it's incredible.
and it's incredible that we found these exact words, which are the words that the priests were supposed to bless them with in order to link my name with the people of Israel. So that's what's so crazy about that text, is that it literally, and it wasn't open right away. That's the thing that's really crazy, is they weren't really sure how to open it, and they were very careful. I mean, they were sitting on it for a long time. And when they finally opened it, can you imagine the chills that they had when they were opening that? And they said, and the people who are opening it can read this. I mean, they're actually well, I'm not sure if the people who are opening it are scientists who know how to open up fragments, or they're people who actually read biblical Hebrew.
Must be the same people that did
The Dead Sea Scrolls, yeah, especially like the copper scroll, but especially when you have a scroll made of metal, you can't just open it up, right? You have to use these chemicals that open it up, and it was a complicated procedure, and they didn't want to destroy it, obviously. But can you imagine, as the people are opening this up, they actually know what they're opening up as they're starting to read this and seeing what's there, because they have no idea what's in there, no idea what's in that roll. And as they're opening up, they start to read this prayer, and they see that these are the words that they've just found. It must have just given them chills when they saw that. And there's things like that happen that you're like, oh, well, I don't know what to tell you. And because the science caught up with us, but it still blew us away. Same thing with the fact that we know who the Kohanim are from 3,000 years ago, the fact that we have a genetic marker for them. I don't know what to tell you other than that's the science. So you can't argue it. The people who've done this were scientists. They were not there to prove the Bible. They were not there they didn't even go into it thinking that that's what they were going to find. The people who opened up that scroll had no idea what they were going to find. Guaranteed. All right. So let's read now as the people are getting ready to leave, because we do want to get to these couple of parts right here, which are really interesting and very timely. And we definitely want to get to them today. So we're going to read this chapter, the longest chapter in the whole Torah. We're going to read it a little bit faster. Why? Because it's so repetitious that it's absolutely ridiculous. And when I say something's repetitious, I mean 12 times repetitious. So here's what happens. On the day that Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it in all its furnishings, as well as the altar and its utensils. When he had anointed and consecrated them, the chieftains of Israel, the heads of the ancestral houses, namely the chieftains of the tribes, those who were in charge of the enrollment, drew near and brought their offering before Adonai, 6 draft carts and 12 oxen, a cart for every 2 chieftains and an ox for each one. And when they had brought them before the tabernacle, Adonai said to Moses, accept these from them for use in the service of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Levites according to their respective services. Now, we read about the dedication of the temple, of the tabernacle, back in Leviticus. But here is a ritual that the book of Numbers says happened. Okay? This is important because you're going to see all the tribes were involved in this. And Moses took the carts and the oxen and gave them to the Levites. 2 carts and 4 oxen he gave to the Gershonites as required for their service. So he's dividing up the stuff that they're going to use for their porterage. We talked about it last week. The stuff that they're going to carry. 2 carts and 4 oxen he gave to the Gershonites. Right? 4 carts and 8 oxen he gave to the Merarites as required for their service under the direction of Itamar and Aaron the priest. But to the Kohathites he did not give any, since theirs was the service of the most sacred porterage. Sure. Their porterage was by shoulder. They didn't need carts because they had to carry it. They were the ones carrying the ark. They were the ones carrying the menorah. They were not allowed to put those on a cart, so they had to carry it. They were carrying them with the poles. So the carts were for the drapes, they were for the pillars, the posts, they were for the tent coverings, for the ropes, those kinds of things, the buckles for it was for the stuff for putting it up. It was not for the holy stuff. So that's how they divided it up. And the heavier the stuff, the more carts they needed. The chieftains also brought the dedication offering for the altar upon its being anointed. As the chieftains were presenting their offerings before the altar, Adonai said to Moses, let them present their offerings for the dedication of the altar, one chieftain each day. And now we have the list. Now I will tell you, even Rashi doesn't write about this. After about the 15th, about the 10th verse into this, Rashi doesn't have anything more to say because it's repeated over and over and over again. There's a couple places where you go, well, this is a little different, but it's not really that much different. Who goes first? Well, interesting. I will tell you one thing. The commentary might say this is that until this moment, until God starts telling them who's going to come first, he didn't know. I'm not sure if it's going to say this right here necessarily. But until God starts telling the people, he doesn't know. Let me see if it says, it doesn't say here, but anyways, so Moses is going to learn now who's going to come first. The one who presents on the first day was Nachshon, son of Aminadab from the tribe of Judah. So the biggest tribe goes first, not the oldest tribe. Also the tribe, of course, of King David and our ancestor is Nachshon. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and one silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, one gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull of the herd, one ram and one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Nachshon, son of Aminadab, the first guy. Guess what? The next 11 guys all gave the same thing. So let's look. So that was the first guy, Nachshon. The next one, though, is Netanel. On the second day, Netanel of Suar, chieftain of Issachar. So now, again, it does not go back. It's continuing on with these middle children, if you will, 4, 5, and 6 children. Chieftain of Issachar made his offering. He presented one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and one silver basin of 70 shekels. So I guess if you add them up together, 200 shekels of silver. Both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. One ladle, gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. One bull of the herd, one ram, one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Netanel, son of Zuar. On the third day, it was a chieftain of the Zebulunites, Eliab, son of Chalon. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. One gold ladle, 10 shekels filled with incense. One bull of the herd, one ram, one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering and for a sacrifice of well-being, 5 turtle doves, 6 rams, and a partridge, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling rams. That was the offering of Eliab, son of Chalon. Well, the question is, again, as we go through these days, you could almost say, what's the biggest takeaway is maybe the order. And the order is actually, of course, by the way that they were stationed, the different tribes of how they go off in their order of their groupings. Remember, there's 4 groupings of 3 tribes in each grouping. On the 4th day was the chieftain of the Reubenites, Elizur, son of Shedeur. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. One gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. One bull of the herd, one ram, one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being. 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling rams. This was the offering. Elizur, son of Shedeur. So 1 per day. So now the question is, why did the Torah keep this? Why didn't it just say the first day these guys go, the second day that guy goes, It's third day this tribe goes. Why does it go through each one? Why does each one list it off? Well, obviously the tribes want to be included. And each one, it was important. And so the Torah keeps these alive so that we know that their offerings, each one of them was the same. Each one of them in this moment here is equal in stature and power. Each one of them was recognized. And so that their ancestors, no dittos. And so and their ancestors, the ancestors for these people, right? They would go back and say, well, my ancestor gave this, and so did yours, and so did yours. No one gave any more. On the fifth day was the chieftain of the Simeonites, Shalumiel, son of Shuri. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle, 10 shekels, filled with incense, 1 bowl of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling rams. That was the offering to Shalumiel, son of Shuri Shaddai. On the 6th day, it was the chieftain of the Gadites, Eliasaph, son of Deuel. His offering, 1 bowl, so 130 shekels, 1 silver. I should make everyone else read this too. Of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year, and for a burnt offering, 1 goat of sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling rams. That was the offering of Eliasaph, son of Deuel. There are kids whose Torah portion this is, and they read the whole portion. The whole portion. I'm not kidding. They read the whole portion. I did not have this portion. I'm not even going to tell you that I had a portion like this. I did not.
Tribes didn't get copies.
This is on a pair. This is 2 columns of the Torah. On the 7th day was the chieftain of the Ephraimites, Elishama, son of Ammichud. His offering, 1 silver bowl, weighing 130 shekels, 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, Chad Gad Yah, right there, 1 goat, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling rams. That was the offering of Elishama, son of Ammichud. On the 8th day, it was the chieftain of the Manassites, Gamliel. We're almost done. We're in the last 4. Son of Pedatsur, his offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb for its first year for a burnt offering, 1 sin goat for sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Gamliel, son of Pedatsur. Notice, by the way, 59 verses already. 59 verses we've gone through. This is why this chapter wasn't broken up by Christian scholars, because it's just the repetition of these tribes. We've got to have it. On the 9th day was the chieftain of the Benjaminites, Abidan, son of Gidoni. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Abidan, son of Gidoni. Hey, by the way, Glory, what does your commentary book say on this?
Okay, hang on. Kind of what you said. Let's see. Hold on. It's with much, I'm just going to skip over here. With much repetition of language, this chapter, the longest in the Pentateuch, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, 5 books.
Records the magnificent gifts to the Lord in tabernacle service from the leaders of the 12 tribes. The fact that the record of these gifts follows the text of the Aaronic benediction seems fitting. In response to God's promise to bless his people, they bring gifts to him in 12 sequential days of celebrative pageantry.
So they say this comes right after the Aaronic benediction, which is another way of saying Birkat Kohanim. So the people get blessed, and then of course, what do? They show their appreciation with these gifts. That's a nice teaching too. On the 10th day, it was the chieftain of the Danites, Achiezer, son of Ammishaddai, his offering, 1 silver bowl, weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour, oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year for burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Achiezer, son of Ammishaddai. On the 11th day, it was the chieftain of the Asherites, Pagiel, son of Ochran. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling rams. That was the offering of Pagiel, son of Ochran. And here we have the last one. On the 12th day, it was the chieftain of the Naphtalites, Achirah, son of Anan. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour, oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Achirah, son of Anan. And that was the dedication, offering for the altar for the from the chieftains of Israel upon its being anointed. Silver bowls, 12, silver basins, 12, gold ladles, 12, silver per bowl, 130 per basin, 70. Total vessels of silver, 2,400 sanctuary shekels. That's 200 per tribe. 12 ladles filled with incense, 10 sanctuary shekels per ladle. The total of the gold ladles, 120. Total of the herd animals for burnt offerings, 12 bulls of rams, 12 of yearling lambs, 12 with their proper meal offerings, goats for sin offerings, 12. Total herd animals for sacrifices of well-being for the shlamim, 24 bulls of rams, 60 of he-goats, 60 yearling lambs, 60. That was the dedication offering for the altar after its anointing. And when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with God, he heard the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on the top of the ark of the pact between the cherubim. Thus God spoke to him. So God spoke to him from, it says, from the ark, from on top of the ark. That was where the sound over the angels, the cherubim, that came from. Now, I do want to just finish with this right here. And we're not going to be able to read the whole, obviously, this whole chapter 8, but I do want to get into this with you because this is, wait, one second. You know what? We'll end here. We'll end there. But I will tell you, that when we get to chapter 9, we're actually going to be reading about a very interesting tradition, which is the second Passover. Now, we're not going to read it next Wednesday because we don't have class next Wednesday because it is Passover. It's the first Passover. But there is a tradition, and it's in chapter 9, and so we'll read it at the end of Passover. We're going to read about how, and that's Wednesday night, the 12th, we'll read about how people who did not get to celebrate Passover had another day. They had a second Passover, Pesach Sheni, which happens on the second month. So a month later, after Passover, is Pesach Sheni. And you'll see that in your Jewish calendars. Some people will say, why does it say Pesach Sheni on my, am I supposed to celebrate Passover again? Well, only if you didn't get to celebrate Passover the first time. And only if it was because you were traveling or because you were in an unclean situation that you couldn't celebrate it the first time. And of course, it's really not such a big issue today because we don't offer up a sacrifice and you don't have to worry about being in an unclean situation where you can't be. But you could be in a situation where you're traveling because they couldn't have, yes. What's interesting about not next week, but 2 weeks when we read it, we're going to read about Passover, about doing the second Passover. We're also going to be reading about blowing the shofar, which of course we do at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But we're also going to be reading about, again, to some extent, these other holidays make their way in there, including the menorah. Because as we read about in the beginning of chapter 8, we won't read this now. This is Behalotcha. This is the lighting of the menorah. And so this is the section where it talks about lighting the menorah. And When we get to the end of that, so that's a new Torah portion. The Halakha is the third portion in Numbers, and now we're going to start getting into action. So as John said, I like Numbers better, and he likes prophets better, right? So here's what happens. I will tell you that when we meet 2 weeks from now, we're going to read this very important story of how right here. The people are going to get punished. And they're going to get punished in a big way.
We're used to.
And that is going to make you think, and it's going to scare you a little bit about thinking with your bellies. And next time when we meet 2 weeks from now, we're going to read this section. I told you every week we're going to read a section from the Torah that you know. This next time, we're going to read Vayehi bin Soa Haron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai Ve'afutzu Oivecha Ve'anusu Misanecha Mipanim. The words we say when we open the ark. We're going to look at it 2 weeks. And what does it say? May your enemies be scattered and may your foes flee before you. When we open up the ark, that's what we're actually asking for God. But we'll see it in 2 weeks. You come back next time, 2 weeks from now, and we will see some stuff that makes us think and also that you know. So everybody, in the meantime, have a very happy Pesach if we don't see you next week or before next week. Have a Zissim Pesach, have a sweet Pesach, we're also supposed to say have a kosher Pesach, but we also want you just to have a healthy holiday. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And Joyce is feeling much better. So if she's not with us by next week, I'll be shocked. Or not next week, the next class.
2 weeks.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.